Before T-Rex thundered across the plains and Triceratops locked horns under ancient skies, dinosaurs were small, scrappy survivors, lizard-like, hollow-boned, and fighting for every inch. But over 180 million years, they transformed. Through extinctions, climate shifts, and evolutionary gambles, they grew into titanic sauropods, armored tanks, and even feathered sky dwellers. This is the untold story of how dinosaurs evolved from quick-footed reptiles into the towering giants of legend. The Mesozoic Era wasn't just a time, it was the crucible that forged Earth's most iconic creatures. The first carnivore kings, Coelophysis and its kin. There was a time before the big sauropods and the loud T-Rex. That time belonged to something much smaller, faster, and deadlier. Coelophysis is a predator that is no bigger than a man and has thin, hollow bones. Its senses are strong enough to rule a harsh, changing world. Coelophysis lived in the late Triassic period, about 210 million years ago. It was one of the first known theropods, which is the group of dinosaurs that would later give rise to the biggest meat eaters in history. But Coelophysis didn't need to be big to win. It was made to be fast, coordinated, and use a cruel pack-based strategy, which made it better than anything else on 2 legs or 4. Measuring about 10 feet long but weighing less than 100 pounds, Coelophysis was all angles and speed. Its name means hollow form, referring to its lightweight, air-filled bones that made it quick and agile. Its legs were long and muscular, designed for running. Its tail acted like a tightrope walker's pole, balancing its movements as it turned and twisted mid-sprint. This was no lumbering brute. This was a living razor, darting across dry riverbeds and open floodplains like a land-bound cheetah. Its head was narrow and lined with sharp, backward-curved teeth, perfect for holding slippery prey like small reptiles, amphibians, and early mammal-like creatures. Its forward-facing eyes gave it depth perception, a critical advantage for a hunter that relied on timing its pounce just right. Fossil evidence suggests it had strong claws on its 3-fingered hands, likely used to grab and pin down struggling victims. But what really made Coelophysis stand out wasn't its speed or teeth, it was its behavior. In Ghost Ranch, New Mexico, paleontologists uncovered a staggering bone bed containing hundreds of Coelophysis fossils all buried together. Some were young, others fully grown. Theories exploded. Was this a flood trap, a drought death site, or were these animals moving in packs? While the exact answer is still debated, the sheer number of individuals in one spot strongly suggests social behavior. Coelophysis may have hunted and lived in coordinated groups like wolves or raptors, bringing down prey too large for a single hunter. That would have made them even more dangerous. Less ambush predator, more tactical strike team. Even scarier, some Coelophysis skeletons look like they have bones from young animals inside their rib cages. This led to a discussion about whether the species ate other species. When they were hungry, did they eat their young? Were these things left over from a nesting place, or were they just wrong assumptions? According to some experts, the bones came from other small animals. But the idea of cannibalism alone gives a clear picture of how harsh, competitive, and heartless life was in the late Triassic. Coelophysis wasn't alone. It had cousins, spread across the globe, part of a growing wave of small theropods that were beginning to experiment with different forms of hunting. Liliensternus, found in Germany, was larger and possibly more solitary, but had the same basic blueprint: 2 legs, sharp claws, and jaws made for tearing. Another cousin, Procompsognathus, was even smaller, barely the size of a chicken, but may have hunted insects or scavenged leftovers from larger predators. These were the early blueprints for what would one day become the kings of the Jurassic and Cretaceous, and they were spreading fast. These early theropods were part of a major evolutionary experiment. Up until this point, most reptiles were quadrupeds, moving slowly on 4 legs. But theropods flipped the script. They leaned forward, lifted off their front limbs, and used speed, agility, and binocular vision to chase down prey. Their hollow bones were lighter. Their hands, freed from walking, could grab and manipulate, and their legs got longer and more efficient. They were no longer just reptiles. They were something new. and the world they lived in demanded it. The late Triassic was a time of chaos. The supercontinent Pangaea had begun to crack and drift. Deserts stretched for miles, broken only by scattered river systems and fern prairies. Life clung to wet areas, and droughts were common. Surviving meant being fast, lean, and willing to eat whatever you could catch. In this world, Coelophysis thrived, not by brute strength, but by being clever, coordinated, and relentless. Plateosaurus and the rise of the giants. Plateosaurus was one of the first truly huge dinosaurs. It lived a long time before Brachiosaurus cast its shadow across the Jurassic plains, and Diplodocus swung its tail like a whip through pine woods. The Plateosaurus lived around 214 million years ago in the late Triassic. It was a major turning point in the development of dinosaurs. It was one of the first big mammals to walk standing on two legs. It was much bigger than most of the other animals around it and paved the way for the huge sauropods that came after. It was evolution's first real attempt to build something big. It had a strange mix of reptile speed and huge size. At a time when most land animals were small, squat, or armored, Plateosaurus stood out. Adults could grow up to 30 feet long and weigh as much as 4 tons. Its long neck gave it access to high vegetation, and its powerful hind legs carried its hefty frame across open plains and forests. It walked mostly on 2 legs, though it may have dropped to all 4s when grazing low to the ground or climbing shallow slopes. This flexible posture made it adaptable, and adaptability was key in a world constantly shifting under environmental stress. Its body was long and muscular, with a barrel-shaped torso, strong hips, and a thick tail for balance. Its arms were relatively short but strong, ending in hands with sharp claws. These claws may have been used for defense or to pull down branches. The head was narrow, with leaf-shaped teeth suited for slicing through ferns, cycads, and horsetails. Unlike the grinding teeth of later sauropods, Plateosaurus didn't chew its food much. It likely swallowed it in chunks and relied on its gut to do the rest, possibly using stones, called gastroliths, to help break down tough plant matter. It was big, but that wasn't its only benefit. In many ways, Plateosaurus's body looked a lot like a bird's. Its bones were strong and light at the same time. Some of them had air pockets inside them to make them lighter, which is something that many later dinosaurs and later birds also had. Because its chest was deep, it was likely that it had big lungs and a strong, effective breathing system. Not only was it big, but it was also busy. It wasn't a slow grazer. It could move fast when it needed to, maybe to get away from danger or to fight for food and mates. Fossils of Plateosaurus have been found across Europe, especially in Germany, Switzerland, and France, suggesting it was highly successful in its time. In fact, one site in Germany has yielded over 100 individuals, ranging from juveniles to fully grown adults. This fossil graveyard has sparked debates among scientists. Was it a mass death from a sudden flood, a drought-driven die-off, or evidence of herding behavior? While we may never know for sure, the sheer number of fossils hints that Plateosaurus may have lived in groups, or at least gathered near water sources during dry seasons. Plateosaurus was a member of the prosauropods, a group that came before the giant four-legged sauropods like Apatosaurus and Brontosaurus. Prosauropods were the experiment phase of giant herbivore evolution. They tested what worked: longer necks, upright walking, bulkier frames, better lungs. Over millions of years, these traits would be pushed to the extreme, resulting in creatures the size of buildings. But it started here, with animals like Plateosaurus that dared to be bigger. Plateosaurus's huge range of growth rates is one of the most interesting things about it. Some quit growing when they were 16 feet long, while others kept growing until they were 30 feet long. Scientists think this could mean that its growth rates were flexible, going slower when food was scarce and faster when food was plenty. This method, known as developmental flexibility, is not common in snakes, but is common in birds and mammals. It might have helped Plateosaurus survive in the Triassic, when droughts and wildfires changed the shape of the land all the time. Pseudosuchians. the crocodile-like rulers before the dinosaurs took over. It wasn't the dinosaurs who held the throne before the sauropods grew taller than trees, and the hawks sharpened their claws. Old archosaurs called pseudosuchians lived in that area. They looked like alligators, but walked tall, ran fast, and ruled the land with their iron mouths and armored hides. During the late Triassic, these animals were the most dangerous hunters, and for a while, it looked like they would be the most powerful people in the Mesozoic. The name pseudosuchian means false crocodile, but these animals were anything but fake. They were part of the same larger family tree that includes both crocodilians and dinosaurs, but their path branched off early. Some looked like bulky armored tanks. Others, like Postosuchus, walked on two legs and had long, narrow skulls full of dagger-like teeth. They came in all shapes and sizes, and they filled nearly every predator role in their ecosystems. Take Postosuchus, for example. Living around 220 million years ago, in what's now the southwestern United States, it was one of the apex predators of its time. It could grow over 20 feet long and weigh up to 1,000 pounds. Though it had short front limbs, its powerful back legs suggest it could occasionally stand or even walk bipedally. That gave it a surprising advantage: reach, speed, and a better view of the landscape. Its jaws were filled with serrated teeth, perfect for tearing flesh, and its thick body was lined with bony armor plates called osteoderms. This wasn't a scavenger. This was a high-speed killer built for ambushes and domination. One group of pseudosuchians that went in a different direction was the etosaurs. These herbivorous snakes had low bodies that looked like pigs and were covered in thick armor. Their noses were short, so they could dig through the ground and grab roots or bugs. They were tough, even though they weren't hunters. They moved in groups to stay safe because their backs were like shields and their tails were covered with spikes. Imagine a crocodile crossed with an armadillo. Now picture dozens of them running across a dry riverbank. The diversity of pseudosuchians in the Triassic was staggering. Some had sails along their backs. Others had long limbs for galloping. There were even marine pseudosuchians that took to the water like early crocodiles, snapping at fish and diving into shallow coastal lagoons. They were everywhere, on land, in rivers, along coastlines, and they were good at what they did. So why don't we talk about them more? Because despite their dominance, pseudosuchians were living on borrowed time. Near the end of the Triassic period, Earth went through one of the most dramatic mass extinctions in its history. A wave of intense volcanic activity cracked open what is now the Atlantic Ocean. Lava spilled across thousands of miles. Massive amounts of carbon dioxide and methane choked the skies. Temperatures spiked, then dropped. Rain turned to acid, food chains collapsed, and the rulers of the land began to fall. Pseudosuchians were hit hard. Many of the top predators, like Postosuchus, went extinct. The armored herbivores vanished. The fast runners disappeared. In the space of just a few million years, a dynasty that had lasted tens of millions of years crumbled. And into the vacuum stepped a group of survivors, the dinosaurs. What made dinosaurs live while pseudosuchians died out? Still up for discussion. Some people think that early dinosaurs had an advantage because their bones were lighter and their lungs worked better. Some people think that dinosaurs were just in the right place at the right time because they were small, flexible, and able to find new food sources. After everything was over, the pseudosuchians were no longer in the focus, no matter what the reason was. Some very distant cousins managed to stay alive in the dark and slowly changed into the alligators we know today. But their time of being in charge was over. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction. Dinosaurs seized the throne. There was no fire to begin with. There was silence at the start. At one point, the world was full of roaring pseudosuchians, tall woods and loud groups. The next thing I knew, those sounds were gone. Slowly, then all at once. After that, the Triassic-Jurassic extinction happened, which was one of the worst mass extinctions in Earth's history. It was after that huge accident that the dinosaurs came into the light. About 201 million years ago, Earth was a single supercontinent called Pangaea. The climate was hot and dry, with no polar ice caps and long, blistering summers. Life clung to rivers and lakes. Reptiles, amphibians, and strange mammal-like creatures shared the land with early dinosaurs. But dinosaurs weren't in charge yet. They were small, nimble, and few in number, living in the shadow of pseudosuchians and other more established creatures. That balance of power was about to change forever. The trigger came from deep beneath Earth's surface. As Pangaea began to split apart into smaller continents, enormous cracks opened up in the crust. These rifts released massive outpourings of lava across what is now the Atlantic Ocean region. The Central Atlantic Magmatic Province, CAMP, erupted over and over again, spilling basalt across entire regions and pumping carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide into the air. These gases acted like a double-edged sword. One trapped heat, the other blocked sunlight. For thousands of years, Earth's climate became unpredictable. Global temperatures spiked, then crashed. Acid rain poisoned fresh water sources, plants withered. Ocean acidification killed marine life. As ecosystems collapsed, animals that once ruled the food chain began to fall. The dominant predators of the Triassic, pseudosuchians like Postosuchus, armored archosaurs, and countless amphibians, vanished. Herbivores starved. Insects died. Even plankton, the base of the oceanic food chain, saw massive losses. Up to 75% of all species that lived on land went extinct. The animals lived, though. Why? That is still one of the most puzzling things in science. Some experts think it was just lucky that dinosaurs lived in places that weren't as touched by the most active volcanoes. Some people think it was biology. Like birds, dinosaurs had lungs that were built on air sacs, which may have helped them live in places with low oxygen and high carbon monoxide. They may have been able to adapt to changes in the world faster because their bones were lighter. They had many babies, and they ate a variety of foods. Whatever the reason, when the smoke cleared and the dust settled, the world was wide open. The old kings were gone. The stage was empty, and the dinosaurs, once the underdogs, seized the throne. The early Jurassic period, which followed the extinction, became a time of explosive dinosaur evolution. With fewer predators and less competition for food, dinosaurs quickly diversified. Herbivores like Corydosaurus and Ankylosaurus grazed across newly greened landscapes. Early theropods like Dilophosaurus hunted freely, growing larger and smarter with each generation. And the first signs of the great sauropods, those long-necked skyscrapers of the future, began to appear. The extinction didn't just clear the land. It changed the air, the plants, and even the way animals breathed. Ferns and conifers dominated the forests, while the earliest cycads and ginkgo trees spread across the land. With a warming, wetter climate and more oxygen returning to the atmosphere, animals began to grow larger. Dinosaurs thrived in this new world. What started as a tragedy became an opportunity, a reboot of life with new rulers rising from the ruins. It wasn't just one day or one event. Thousands or even hundreds of thousands of years passed before the species died out. But the balance of power had changed when it was over. The long time of Triassic animals was over. It was now official. The age of dinosaurs had started. How the Jurassic shaped evolution, the greenhouse world of giants. Following the chaos of the Triassic-Jurassic extinction, Earth entered a new era marked by healing, growth, and huge amounts of life. This was the Jurassic Age, which began about 201 million years ago and went on for almost 60 million years. There was no polar ice, the water was very high, and the air was full of oxygen. There were still volcanoes in the area, but woods came back, rivers ran, and plant life grew like crazy. The dinosaurs saw it as the ideal storm, not one of destruction, but one of chance. Things changed quickly in this world with greenhouses. The climate of the Jurassic was unlike today's. Instead of snowy poles and seasonal extremes, most of the planet enjoyed year-round warmth. Tropical forests stretched across entire continents. Rain was frequent, feeding dense ferns, conifers, and cycads. Lush green covered the earth, and with so much plant life came a simple rule: more food, more giants. Dinosaurs answered back in kind. Large meat eaters took the place of small, quick animals during this time. This is when the first long-necked sauropods went from being small eaters to real giants. Evolution, which used to be slow and careful, sped up all of a sudden. More dinosaurs than ever before got bigger, stronger, and different all over the world. One of the key changes was the shift from low-growing plants to tall vegetation. Jurassic forests were filled with towering tree ferns, palm-like cycads, and conifers that reached as high as modern redwoods. To reach the nutritious leaves up top, some herbivores began evolving longer necks, stronger legs, and massive torsos to support giant guts. Digesting this tough plant matter required enormous stomachs and long processing times, leading to even larger body sizes. Enter the sauropods. Creatures like Cetiosaurus, Camarasaurus, and eventually Diplodocus and Brachiosaurus grew to sizes never seen before on land. With lightweight, air-filled bones, efficient lungs, and steady growth over decades, they became walking skyscrapers, 30, 50, even 80 feet long. Their massive size protected them from most predators. After all, what meat-eater wants to risk taking down a 50-ton mountain with a swinging tail? But predators adapted too. The Jurassic gave rise to a new wave of carnivores, taller, smarter, and faster than their Triassic ancestors. Dilophosaurus, with its twin crests and nimble build, was among the first. Later, Allosaurus rose to the top, combining power with agility. These predators didn't just rely on brute force. They may have hunted in packs, coordinated attacks, and targeted the sick or young in a herd. It was an arms race between predator and prey, and the rules were constantly shifting. The Jurassic didn't just favor size, it favored specialization. Dinosaurs began to fill specific roles in the environment. Some sauropods grazed low, sweeping the ground with their necks. Others reared up to reach treetop canopies. Small herbivores like Scutellosaurus and Stegosaurus developed body armor and tail weapons to defend themselves. The ecosystems became layered and complex, with each species adapting to avoid competition and increase survival. It was also the age of growth. While Pangaea was still breaking up, new land bridges were being built. Dinosaurs moved, changed, and developed without any help from each other. As species moved from one area to another, they brought new traits and habits with them. South America, North America, Africa, and Eurasia all had their own unique groups of dinosaurs. These areas were linked by changing landscapes and rising sea levels. Even flying reptiles, the pterosaurs, took full advantage of the Jurassic world. With fewer large birds or aerial threats, they ruled the skies. Some were small insect catchers. Others, like pteranodons' early relatives, glided over oceans with wingspans of over 10 feet. Insects, amphibians, and early mammals also quietly evolved in the shadows, laying the groundwork for future upheavals. The way dinosaurs kept themselves warm inside is a little-known fact about Jurassic development. A lot of experts now think that some dinosaurs from the Jurassic were warm-blooded, or at least able to keep their bodies at a certain temperature. This made it possible to move farther, hunt more, and grow faster. In a world like a greenhouse, having warm blood gave you an advantage, and it may have helped the dinosaurs take over even more quickly. The Jurassic wasn't just a time of survival, it was a time of invention. Nature was experimenting on a grand scale, stretching necks, hardening armor, sharpening claws, and extending lifespans. The planet was stable, the climate was kind, and the biosphere was exploding with life. Diplodocus to Brachiosaurus, why sauropods got so big. In a world with tall trees, plants that never stopped growing, and few animals that were big enough to threaten them, sauropods didn't just get bigger, they changed what it meant to be big. From the Diplodocus, with its whip-like tail, to the Brachiosaurus with its high forehead, these Jurassic giants were more than just huge plant-eaters. They were the biggest animals that had ever lived on land. But being bigger wasn't just because they ate more. It was a complicated plan for development, made up of bones, lungs, behavior, and chances. Let's start with Diplodocus. It lived around 150 million years ago and could grow up to 90 feet long, yet it was surprisingly lightweight for its length. That's because its bones were filled with air sacs, like the ones birds have today. These air pockets reduced weight without sacrificing strength, allowing the dinosaur to stretch out that long, whip-like tail and its impossibly extended neck. It wasn't bulky. It was engineered like a bridge, strong, light, and built for reach. It had a neck that was stiff and could be over 25 feet long. Its legs didn't curl like a giraffe's. Instead, they moved mostly side to side, sweeping across the ground or reaching across large areas without moving their huge bodies. That meant Diplodocus could eat for hours without moving, using little energy to pick up ferns and soft plants that were lying on the ground like a living lawnmower. Then there's Brachiosaurus, a very different kind of giant. While Diplodocus hugged the ground, Brachiosaurus reached for the sky. It had a shorter tail, longer front legs, and a neck that pointed upward like a tree crane. It likely fed on high vegetation, leaves that few other animals could reach. Some scientists believe it could grow over 80 feet long and weigh more than 60 tons. Standing up to 40 feet tall, it may have stripped the tops of conifers that even other sauropods ignored. With its nostrils high on its head, it may have even been able to breathe easily while feeding among the treetops. Why did dinosaurs get so big? One reason is easy to understand: food. There were lots of plants in the Jurassic world. There was no grass yet, but plants, cycads, and big conifer trees grew in thick woods everywhere. Animals that were bigger could get to more food, break down tougher plants, and store more energy. But processing took time, and being big also helped with that. The guts of sauropods were very big, and they probably had fermenting microbes that broke down plant matter slowly over days or even weeks. With longer guts, bigger bodies could handle food more quickly and with less need to chew. Unlike mammals, which chew thoroughly, sauropods probably swallowed their food in chunks. Their simple peg-like teeth were good for stripping leaves, but not for grinding. So instead, their massive bellies did the work, slowly churning, fermenting, and absorbing nutrients. It was like having a walking compost system inside their bodies. And again, the bigger they were, the more efficient this process became. Another advantage of size was protection. A full-grown Brachiosaurus or Apatosaurus had almost no predators. Even the largest carnivores of the time, like Allosaurus, would have thought twice before attacking a 50-ton wall of muscle and bone. Sauropods didn't need armor. Their size was their shield. For the young and vulnerable, herding behavior likely offered safety in numbers, something many modern animals like elephants still rely on. Their bodies were also built for the long haul. Their column-like legs worked like pillars, supporting their immense weight with minimal stress. Their tails balanced their long necks, and their feet had cushioning pads to handle the pressure of walking across hard ground. Evolution had turned them into walking skyscrapers. Mobile, efficient, and hard to stop. Even their respiratory system gave them an edge. Like birds, sauropods likely had a unidirectional breathing system where air flowed in one direction through the lungs. This made oxygen exchange more efficient and kept their huge bodies cooler. It may have also supported their endurance, allowing them to move slowly but steadily across long distances in search of food and water. The most shocking thing about them is that their size didn't make them slow. Even though they were very big, sauropods may have walked up to 10 miles a day to find food and move with the seasons. Their bones grew quickly, which means they hit full size very quickly, maybe in just 15 to 30 years. They would have been able to avoid being eaten and take over their surroundings even earlier if they had grown so quickly. Stegosaurus and the battle for the middle ground. The size wasn't the biggest. The speed wasn't the best. It didn't have the strongest protection or the sharpest claws. Even so, Stegosaurus made a name for itself in the harsh world of the Jurassic, and it did so in style. Stegosaurus wasn't a dinosaur that relied on being big or fast, even though it had a row of tall back plates and a tail full of poisonous spikes. It did well in the area between big sauropods and fast hunters, by being smart where others were strong, and by developing traits that scientists still don't understand. Living about 155 to 150 million years ago in what's now western North America, Stegosaurus roamed alongside giants like Diplodocus, Apatosaurus, and apex predators like Allosaurus. But unlike those creatures, it kept a low center of gravity. It walked on 4 short, sturdy legs, had a broad body, and a small head close to the ground. Its back was lined with 17 large kite-shaped plates that rose like sails from its spine, some nearly 2 feet tall. And then there was the thagomizer, 4 long, sharpened spikes on its tail that it used like a swinging mace to smash bones and drive away threats. Despite its intimidating weaponry, Stegosaurus was a plant eater. It likely fed on low-lying ferns, cycads, and other soft vegetation, using its narrow-beaked mouth to strip leaves and its peg-like teeth to chew in simple motions. It wasn't built to eat high or run fast, but it didn't need to. Its real genius was in its defense. Paleontologists have been confused by the plates on its back for more than 100 years. Why were they armor? Maybe, but they were too thin to stop bites. Do you think they were used to control the heat, like organic sun panels? That's one idea. Each plate had blood vessels running through it, and experts think that these plates could have taken in or let go of heat based on the dinosaurs' needs. Today, though, the most common idea is that those plates were meant to be seen, either to mate, scare other animals, or identify species. Like the feathers or horns of a peacock or moose, they helped Stegosaurus stand out in a forest full of other big animals. It looked like no other dinosaur that I knew of. But if the plates were for show, the tail was built for war. The thagomizer, as it's humorously named thanks to a Far Side comic, wasn't just for decoration, it was a serious weapon. Fossil evidence shows that some Allosaurus skeletons have puncture wounds that match Stegosaurus tail spikes, right in the bone. This suggests that the spikes weren't just defensive, they were deadly. Stegosaurus could swing its tail with force, using its flexible hips and low stance to deliver crushing blows to predators that got too close. Still, Stegosaurus had its limits. It had one of the smallest brain-to-body ratios of any dinosaur. Its brain was about the size of a lime, just 3 ounces, despite its 30-foot body. This led to early, outdated claims that it had a second brain in its hips to help control movement. That's been debunked, but it does highlight how little we understood about this animal for a long time. In truth, its nervous system was likely no more primitive than other herbivores of its time. Intelligence wasn't what it needed to survive. It was strategy and design. Its evolutionary role was unique. Stegosaurus wasn't built to compete with sauropods for towering trees, or with fast ornithopods for speed. It found its niche in thick, ground-level vegetation, relying on armor and intimidation to thrive. And it didn't live alone. There were multiple species of stegosaurs across the globe, from China's Huayangosaurus to Europe's Dacentrurus, each with different plate shapes and body sizes, suggesting local adaptations and evolutionary experimentation. It was interesting how it walked. Stegosaurus's front legs were much shorter than its back legs, which made it stand on its hind legs, making it look like a natural slide. This likely made it less quick but more stable, and its wide stance allowed it move its tail more freely and with more control. It wasn't classy, however it worked. Allosaurus, the apex predator before T-Rex. The Jurassic had a king long before Tyrannosaurus rex came to Earth. It was called Allosaurus, and it was the most important animal in the world for the last 1,000,000 years. Even though it wasn't the biggest or most famous animal ever, Allosaurus was the worst thing that could happen in the ferns in the world it ruled, about 150 million years ago. It was quick, fierce, and surprisingly smart for its time. Its surroundings had fully formed this killer. It didn't just make it through the Jurassic, it owned it. Allosaurus means different lizard, a name it earned because of its unique skull structure when first discovered in the 19th century, and it was different. Measuring up to 35 feet long and weighing around 2 tons, this predator had a lightweight frame, hollow bones, and long muscular legs. It wasn't built like a tank, It was built like a cheetah with claws, a predator designed for speed and efficiency, not brute force. Its head was large, filled with over 60 serrated teeth, and each one was curved backward, perfect for slicing meat and holding onto prey that fought to escape. The head of Allosaurus was one thing that made it stand out. Later hunters like T-Rex had thick, crushing jaws, but Allosaurus's skull was lighter and more flexible, so it was almost like it could absorb pain. It could open its jaws wide, almost 90 degrees, and bite quickly, cutting through its food. It would then pull back before the prey could respond. Some experts have called the way it eats hatchet-like, since its upper jaw swings down over and over like an axe to cut and tear through meat. Its arms, unlike those of T-Rex, were long and powerful, with 3-fingered hands tipped with deadly claws. These were tools of precision, not leftovers. Allosaurus could likely grasp, hold, and even pin down smaller prey, using its claws to wound or control victims while its jaws did the killing. Its legs were strong but not bulky, suggesting it could run or at least chase at moderate speeds when necessary. In short, it was built for ambush and agility. But perhaps the most intriguing question is this: did Allosaurus hunt alone or in groups? Fossil sites in places like the Morrison Formation in North America contain the remains of many Allosaurus individuals, often near the bones of large herbivores like Stegosaurus or Camarasaurus. Some scientists believe this points to group hunting behavior, packs of Allosaurus working together to bring down prey too large for one animal alone. Others argue these are simply feeding grounds, where many predators gathered after the kill, not before. We may never know for sure, but even the possibility of cooperative hunting in a predator of this age is mind-blowing. Speaking of prey, Allosaurus had plenty to choose from. It lived during a golden age of herbivorous giants. Sauropods like Apatosaurus, Diplodocus, and Camarasaurus filled the landscape, their long necks rising above the trees. But these massive animals weren't easy targets. So Allosaurus likely hunted the young, the sick, or the isolated, and may have relied on ambush attacks to get the upper hand. A single powerful bite, followed by retreat and bleeding, might have been enough to bring a large prey animal down over time. Within its bones is an interesting trait. CT scans of Allosaurus heads show that it had a big olfactory bulb, which means it could smell things very well. Its eyes were looking forward, which helped it see in the dark, which was useful for hunting in woods. Allosaurus wasn't just strong, it was also sharp. Its body was flexible, and it could attack quickly. Yet despite all this, it wasn't invincible. Injuries were common. Many fossils show broken ribs, healed fractures, and bite marks on bones, sometimes from other Allosaurus. This suggests they may have fought among themselves, over territory, mates, or food. They lived rough lives, full of conflict, competition, and danger, even from their own kind. Balance was what made Allosaurus such a good hunter. It didn't depend on just one trait. The right amount of speed, teeth, claws, and brains were all in it. At a time when sauropods and armored herbivores ruled the world, it evolved to be quick, strong, and smart enough to stay on top. Feathers before flight, the dinosaurs that looked like birds. Flesh walked the earth long before birds had wings. Between the end of the Jurassic and the beginning of the Cretaceous, amazing things started to happen in the world of dinosaurs. A group of small, light-built theropods, which are related to Velociraptor and T-Rex, began to grow feathers. Not for taking off, not yet, but to keep warm, show off, and maybe even hide. These things were not really birds, but they were pretty close. Their shape made it hard to tell the difference between dinosaurs and the birds that would one day rule the sky. Scientists are learning more and more that birds did not come from dinosaurs as they had thought. Birds used to be dinosaurs. Anchiornis is one of the most famous cases of this change. This animal lived in China about 160 million years ago. Its name means near bird. It was about the size of a crow and had long arms and legs. Its preserved remains show beautiful feather marks from head to tail, including downy body feathers and long plumes on its arms and legs that looked like wings. However, Anchiornis was not able to move. It had too few bones, too few muscles, and arms that were too short. It wasn't for flying with those feathers. Most likely, they were for warmth or show. It was like this dinosaur was in the middle of its evolutionary journey, testing out flight before it became a real thing. Then there's Microraptor, another star from China's famous fossil beds. This creature was smaller, sleeker, and looked like something out of a science fiction movie. It had wings not just on its arms, but on its legs. 4 wings total, covered in aerodynamic feathers. It lived around 120 million years ago, and may have been able to glide from tree to tree like a prehistoric flying squirrel. Some scientists believe it could even manage short bursts of powered flight, flapping all 4 limbs in the air. But whether it flew or glided, Microraptor was clearly something new. It was a dinosaur with the blueprint of a bird. Fossil sites in Liaoning Province, China, have revealed dozens of feathered dinosaurs, many more than most people realize. Creatures like Sinornithosaurus, Caudipteryx, and Yutyrannus all wore feathers, and they weren't small. Yutyrannus, for example, was a cousin of T-Rex that grew over 30 feet long and weighed nearly 3,000 pounds. Yet it had thick filamentous feathers covering its body. Why would a predator that size need feathers? Probably not for flying, but for warmth. It lived in a colder climate, and its feathers acted like a built-in winter coat. This flips the old view of dinosaurs on its head. For decades, people imagined scaly, lizard-like giants roaming in slow motion. But now, we know many dinosaurs were warm-blooded, agile, and covered in feathers of various types, some fuzzy, some flashy, some sharp. Feathers didn't begin with birds. They began with dinosaurs, possibly as far back as the Triassic. The early uses of feathers were likely non-aerodynamic. They helped with temperature regulation, allowed for visual displays during mating rituals, or made the animal harder to see in the shadows of a dense forest. Think of them like tools, first for keeping warm, then for showing off, then, only later, for taking to the skies. It was one of nature's most brilliant cases of accidental design. Evolve something for one purpose, then find a better one. Fossils like Archaeopteryx, discovered in Germany in the 1860s, were once seen as the perfect missing link between birds and dinosaurs. It had flight feathers, a wishbone, and even the beginnings of a beak. But it also had teeth, clawed fingers, and a long bony tail. Today, we realize that Archaeopteryx wasn't the first bird. It was just one branch of many in a wide, feathery family tree. The truth is, there were hundreds of dinosaur species experimenting with flight, feathers, and everything in between. Some theropods that lived on the ground also had protofeathers. The velociraptor, the one that became famous in Jurassic Park, almost certainly had wings. It has quill bumps on its bones where feathers used to be, and a fluffy coat would have covered its smooth body. Even though it couldn't fly, its feathers were probably used for warmth, balance, and maybe even to sit on eggs like a bird. By the end of the Cretaceous, the line between bird and dinosaur had all but vanished. Some feathered dinosaurs developed better wings, lighter bones, and stronger breast muscles. They took to the air, not in one leap, but in a slow evolutionary crawl. And when the asteroid struck 66 million years ago, wiping out most of the dinosaurs, one group survived, the avians, the birds. Therizinosaurs, the feathered freaks with giant claws. You might think it was funny if someone told you there was a dinosaur that looked like a big winged sloth and had sickle-shaped claws longer than your arm. It wasn't, though. It was true. It was called Therizinosaurus, and it was one of the weirdest dinosaurs ever found. A lot of the rules about what a dinosaur should be were broken. It wasn't a meat hunt. It didn't move quickly. Its teeth were not very sharp. Still, its claws looked like they could kill anyone in the Mesozoic Era. Scientists didn't know what it was for years. But now we know that this freak and its relatives were a group of theropods that went in a strange direction. They had peace, feathers, and sword-sized claws. When fossils of Therizinosaurus were first discovered in Mongolia in the late 1940s, all paleontologists found were giant claws, each nearly 3 feet long. They looked so sharp and intimidating that scientists assumed they belonged to a giant predator, maybe something like T-Rex, but even worse. But as more bones were uncovered over the decades, the real picture began to emerge, and it stunned the scientific world. Instead of a meat-eating monster, Therizinosaurus turned out to be a slow-moving, long-necked, pot-bellied herbivore. It had a beaked mouth for clipping plants, a massive belly for digesting tough vegetation, and long feather-covered arms with claws that looked like scythes. It stood on two legs, walked with a hunched, waddling posture, and measured up to 33 feet long. Its claws were still deadly, but not for hunting. Instead, they were likely used to pull down branches, strip leaves, or defend itself from predators. Therizinosaurus and its relatives are very interesting because of their strange family tree. Theropods are the group that these dinosaurs are in. T-Rex, Velociraptor, and current birds are also in this group. Most theropods ate meat, and their sharp teeth and claws were made for killing. That is not how Therizinosaurs did it, though. It's possible that their ancestors stopped eating meat at some point in the past. Over millions of years, their bodies got bigger so they could digest leaves. Their necks got longer so they could browse, and their feathers got longer to keep them warm and show off. And make no mistake, these animals were fluffy. Fossil evidence from close relatives like Bapiosaurus shows that Therizinosaurs had thick, filamentous feathers covering their bodies. They probably looked like giant mutant turkeys with Freddy Krueger claws. But while their appearance was wild, their lifestyle was gentle. They spent their days browsing in the forests of late Cretaceous Asia, using their reach and claws to access food other herbivores couldn't. Still, those claws weren't just big salad forks. When it came time, they were real guns. If a Therizinosaurus was trapped, it could swing its huge arms out and cut through flesh or bone, scaring away even big hunters like Tarbosaurus. Think about being a meat-eating dinosaur that was looking for food and got hit in the face with a 3-foot spear. Most animals would run away from that fight. Other members of this bizarre family included Nothronicus from North America and Alxosaurus from China. These smaller therizinosaurs shared the same basic body plan: long necks, beaked mouths, feathered arms, pot bellies, and of course, claws. Fossils of Nothronicus show that it had a stiff, upright stance, likely using its tail for balance while it reached up into trees. Like their larger cousin Therizinosaurus, these dinosaurs evolved in environments full of competition, where being different was an advantage. But perhaps the most intriguing thing about therizinosaurs is what they tell us about dinosaur evolution as a whole. They prove that not all meat-eating dinosaurs stayed meat-eaters. They show how feathers, once thought to be a bird-only feature, were widespread and used for many reasons: insulation, camouflage, signaling, or defense. And they demonstrate how evolution isn't a straight line from simple to advanced. Sometimes it loops back, takes weird turns, and creates creatures that don't seem to make sense until you see the whole picture. The Cretaceous explosion, when dinosaurs diversified everywhere. In the Cretaceous, there were a lot of different kinds of animals. The Jurassic was the age of giants, from horned beasts in North America to sail-backed predators in Africa, and from armored tanks in Asia to duck-billed groups in Antarctica. The last few million years of the dinosaur era were a crazy mix of shapes, sizes, and habits. It looked like evolution had gotten out of hand. The dinosaurs didn't just get bigger or move faster. They also got stranger, more colorful, and more specialized. Some of them flew, some of them swam, some of them grew crests, shields, or huge claws. During the Cretaceous, there were many worlds, and dinosaurs learned to live in all of them. This period lasted roughly 80 million years, from 145 million years ago until the asteroid struck 66 million years ago. That's a long time, and in that span, Earth's continents split apart, oceans widened, climates shifted, and plants changed forever. Flowering plants, angiosperms, appeared and spread, transforming ancient fern jungles into more modern-looking forests. and dinosaurs responded by evolving into some of the most specialized animals the world had ever seen. Take pachycephalosaurs, for example. These were the dome-headed dinosaurs famous for their thick skulls, some up to 10 inches thick. Species like Pachycephalosaurus likely used their heads for combat, either ramming rivals or engaging in head-to-head shoving matches like bighorn sheep today. Others think the domes were for display, signaling strength or identity. Either way, this was a dinosaur that wore its weapon on its head and turned its own skull into armor. Then there were the ceratopsians. This group started with small creatures like Psittacosaurus, about the size of a dog, but over millions of years, they grew into giants like Triceratops, with massive frills, face horns, and parrot-like beaks. Their neck frills may have protected their necks, helped with thermoregulation, or served as mating displays. Horns came in all shapes and sizes, from the straight spikes of Styracosaurus to the curled blades of Pachyrhinosaurus. Some had more horns than faces. These were not slow, dull animals. They were complex, possibly social, and fiercely defended their herds. And don't forget the ankylosaurs, the walking tanks of the Cretaceous. Covered in bony armor from head to tail, some even had massive tail clubs that could shatter bone. These animals likely moved slowly, but were almost impossible to kill. Their heads were low and wide, their teeth small and leaf-shaped, perfect for low browsing. And while they didn't chase predators, they didn't need to. Predators knew better than to mess with a spiky boulder. Meanwhile, in the skies, feathered dinosaurs continued evolving into true birds. Species like Confuciusornis and Ichthyornis show how flight adapted over time. Some had beaks with teeth, others had long tails or clawed fingers. There wasn't just one path to flight. There were dozens of experiments happening all at once, as different species tested new features in a world that was constantly changing. In the oceans, marine reptiles like Mosasaurus took over, growing up to 50 feet long and ruling like underwater dragons. And then there were the massive pterosaurs in the air. Some, like Quetzalcoatlus, had wingspans over 30 feet. While not dinosaurs themselves, they shared the skies and prey with their land-based cousins, and added even more diversity to this chaotic era. But the rise of predators that fought the earlier kings may have been the most important change in the Cretaceous. Early tyrannosaurs in North America were small, like DeLong, who was a chicken-sized hunter. But over millions of years, they changed into huge top predators, with T-Rex being the most famous of all of them. Carnotaurus and other giant abelisaurids that lived in South America got small arms and bulldog mouths. Spinosaurus moved to Africa and lived in rivers. Its back changed to look like a sail, and its jaws changed to catch fish. No matter what land they were on, predators found new ways to rule. And yet, even with all this variety, the Cretaceous wasn't a peaceful time. Climate change, volcanic activity, and shifting ecosystems forced dinosaurs to adapt constantly. Some succeeded and flourished. Others vanished long before the asteroid hit. Entire groups, like the massive sauropods, became rare or disappeared in some regions, replaced by herds of smaller, more mobile plant eaters. Spinosaurus, the river monster that broke all the rules. For more than 100 years, most people thought of dinosaurs as roaring, land-based giants that moved quickly or slowly, but always stayed on dry land. Then Spinosaurus showed up and broke everything we thought we knew. This was not a normal animal. It lived more like a hippo than a lizard, and was longer than T-Rex. Spinosaurus was not only unique, it was new. Its spine was shaped like a sail, its head was shaped like a crocodile, and it lived in water. The story of this dinosaur is one of wonder, mistake, and finally, recovery. It was the first real dinosaur designed to live in water. Spinosaurus aegyptiacus lived around 100 million years ago during the mid-Cretaceous period in what is now North Africa. It was enormous. Estimates suggest it reached lengths of 50 to 59 feet, possibly longer than any known carnivorous dinosaur. But what made it truly bizarre wasn't just its size, it was its shape. Unlike T-Rex, which had a massive skull designed for bone-crushing bites, Spinosaurus had a long, narrow snout packed with conical teeth, more like a crocodile than a land predator. These teeth were perfect for gripping slippery prey like fish, and its nostrils were located high on its head, allowing it to breathe while partially submerged. Atop its back rose its most distinctive feature, a towering sail formed by elongated neural spines, some over 6 feet tall. Scientists still debate its purpose. It may have been for display, attracting mates or intimidating rivals. It could have played a role in regulating body temperature, like the sails of certain reptiles today. Or maybe it helped camouflage the animal when swimming, breaking up its silhouette in the water. Whatever the reason, the sail made Spinosaurus one of the most recognizable and confusing dinosaurs ever found. For decades, we misunderstood Spinosaurus completely. The original fossils were discovered in Egypt in 1912 by German paleontologist Ernst Stromer. Unfortunately, those bones were destroyed during World War II when the Munich museum housing them was bombed. For years, all we had was Stromer's notes and a few fragments. Then, in the early 2000s, new fossils began to emerge in Morocco, bits of skull, vertebrae, and eventually partial skeletons. These remains revealed a creature unlike anything seen before. By 2014, a major breakthrough stunned the scientific world. A new Spinosaurus specimen showed drastically different proportions: short, stubby legs, flat feet, and a long paddle-like tail. In 2020, that tail was fully described, and it changed everything. It was wide, flexible, and capable of lateral movement, exactly what you'd expect from an aquatic swimmer. This wasn't a dinosaur that just hung around near water. This was a dinosaur that lived in it. Spinosaurus likely hunted fish in massive river systems that flowed through North Africa during the Cretaceous. Its diet probably included giant sawfish, lungfish, and coelacanths, huge, slow-moving aquatic prey. It may have also scavenged on land or eaten smaller animals near shorelines. But its physical build, dense bones to reduce buoyancy, nostrils high on the skull, and a propeller-like tail, pointed clearly toward a life spent mostly in the water. Then there were its arms and legs. With their long, strong arms and big claws, they may have used them to catch food or dig through mud on the sides of rivers. Its legs, which were once thought to be very long, like those of other theropods, were actually very short, which suggests it wasn't good at running on land. It probably walked funny on land, but it was agile and dangerous underwater. Spinosaurus may have lived in the same way that a crocodile or river monster does. It hung out below the water, waiting for something to get too close. Spinosaurus is interesting for more than just how strange it is. That's how its story shows how science is always changing. For a long time, we put dinosaurs into neat groups. Those that walked on land, ate meat, and ate plants. Nature isn't neat, though. It's a mess. Spinosaurus also shows us that evolution doesn't follow the rules. It breaks them. This dinosaur left the land and changed to live in water. It may have been the top hunter in a whole river system. Ankylosaurs, the living tanks of the dinosaur world. Visualize a monster with so much armor that it looked like a living castle. This dinosaur didn't run away from danger. It faced it. Its head to tail were covered in thick, hard plates, and the end of its tail had a huge club that could break bones. This was the ankylosaur, which was nature's first tank. Most dinosaurs lived by being fast, big, or having sharp teeth. Ankylosaurs, on the other hand, were almost impossible to kill. Even though the Cretaceous was a dangerous place, that plan worked amazingly well. Ankylosaurs weren't just one species. They were a whole family of armored dinosaurs. They first appeared in the early Jurassic, but it was during the Cretaceous that they truly came into their own. These creatures were low to the ground, broad-bodied, and moved slowly, but they were built like tanks for a reason. Every inch of their backs was covered in thick osteoderms, bony plates embedded in the skin like a coat of natural armor. Their heads were like helmets, often with horns or spikes around the edges. Their eyelids even had armor. That's how serious their defense system was. Ankylosaurus magniventris was one of the most well-known of these live tanks. Around 68 to 66 million years ago, this dinosaur lived in what is now North America. It was the last dinosaur of its kind to live. It got as long as 30 feet and weighed almost 8 tons. Even though it was very big, it moved slowly and ate plants. Its wide beak-like mouth helped it find food on the ground. It wasn't very fast, but it made up for it with defense. The tail of Ankylosaurus ended in a massive club of solid bone. This wasn't just for show. Biomechanical studies suggest it could swing that club with enough force to crush bone, maybe even break the legs of predators like T-Rex. In fact, the tail club may have been one of the most powerful weapons in the dinosaur world, capable of swinging with the same energy as a modern baseball bat, but made of several hundred pounds of solid bone. But the ankylosaur's defenses didn't stop at their tails. Many species had rows of spikes, studs, and armor plates all over their bodies. Some had triangular shoulder spikes or sharp knobs sticking out from their sides. Others had long neck armor or even protective coverings over their throats. To a predator, trying to bite into an ankylosaur was like chewing on a tank made of knives. Despite their fearsome appearance, ankylosaurs were peaceful plant eaters. They spent their days foraging for low-growing vegetation like ferns, cycads, and flowering plants. Their wide muzzles were perfect for sweeping through ground-level greenery, and their small teeth worked more like scissors than grinders. Some scientists believe they may have had large digestive chambers, like modern cows, where food could ferment and break down over time. It's interesting that not every ankylosaur was built the same. There are two main groups that paleontologists use to describe them: nodosaurids and ankylosaurids. Nodosaurids didn't have a tail club, but their shoulder spikes were often even more unique. For example, Edmontonia had huge shoulder armor and rows of sharp studs running down its back. Ankylosaurids, like Ankylosaurus, had tail clubs and armor that was wider and flatter. Both groups had a lot of success and spread all over North America, Europe, and Asia. In Asia, one particularly famous ankylosaur was Saichania, whose name means beautiful one in Mongolian. Despite the name, this dinosaur was a beast, heavily armored, incredibly strong, and adapted to desert-like environments. Its armor wasn't just on its back. It had bony reinforcements in its ribs, hips, and even eyelids, making it one of the most thoroughly defended creatures to ever walk the earth. Ankylosaurs were very different from other animals of their time, which makes them even more interesting. Hadrosaurs relied on speed and herding, and ceratopsians like Triceratops used horns and frills to scare off enemies, but ankylosaurs just dared them to try. Their only way to stay alive was to outrun and out-armor any danger. It worked. They lived with top animals and managed to stay alive for tens of millions of years, as shown by fossils. Pachycephalosaurs and the evolution of bone armor. It seems like Pachycephalosaurus is trying too hard to get your attention at first glance. It has a thick, dome-shaped head that rises like a bowling ball above its eyes. Its face is covered with knobs and ridges of bone that look like ancient jewels. But this strange-looking carnivore wasn't just something to look at. This dinosaur was part of a group that used their own heads as rams. Other plant eaters got horns, wings or tail clubs, but Pachycephalosaurs got their most important tool on top of their heads, and we're still not sure how they used it. The name Pachycephalosaurus means thick-headed lizard, and it's well earned. The top of its skull could be over 10 inches thick, solid bone reinforced to take or deliver powerful blows. This dinosaur lived during the late Cretaceous period, around 70 to 66 million years ago, in what is now North America. It grew up to 15 feet long, walked on 2 legs, and had relatively short arms. Its teeth were small and leaf-shaped, ideal for munching on low-growing plants, fruits, or soft vegetation. But what made it truly unique, what made its entire family of dome-headed dinosaurs stand out, was that massive skull dome. But why did it evolve such a thick head? The most popular theory is simple: headbutting. Much like modern bighorn sheep or musk oxen, Pachycephalosaurs may have used their reinforced skulls to slam into each other in displays of dominance, combat, or mating competition. 2 males might have squared off, lowered their heads and charged, bam, clashing domes in thunderous collisions. Their vertebrae and spinal alignment suggest their necks were built to absorb shock, and the shape of their skulls might have helped direct force away from the brain. But this idea isn't completely true. Some paleontologists say that a straight head-on collision would have hurt more than helped. Others think that these dinosaurs might have attacked by flanking, which means they hit their opponents in the sides with their heads instead of charging them straight on. It's also possible that the dome was mostly for show and not for fighting, like the feathers or horns of a peacock or stag. So a bigger dome might have meant strength, maturity, or good genes, without ever having to be used as a weapon. Fossil evidence has provided some interesting clues. Several pachycephalosaur skulls show signs of healed lesions and damage, suggesting that individuals did, in fact, knock heads, at least occasionally. But not every member of this family had the same dome shape. Some had flat or lightly domed skulls, with large spikes or knobs instead. For example, Stygimoloch had a smaller dome and long, sharp horns sticking out the back of its skull. Dracorex, whose name literally means Dragon King, had a flat head covered in bony spikes, giving it a reptilian, fantasy-like appearance. Many experts now think that these skulls with different shapes might not be from different species, but from different times of the same dinosaur's life. This idea says that Dracorex and Stygimoloch were actually young or almost adult forms of Pachycephalosaurus, and that the shape of its head changed as it grew older. If this is true, it would mean that young people had sharp, spiked heads, while adults had smoother, more dome-shaped heads for hitting. Whatever the exact purpose of their headgear, pachycephalosaurs were widespread across what is now North America and Asia. Fossils have been found from Montana to Mongolia, suggesting they were highly adaptable and successful in a variety of environments. Their strong legs and stiff tails may have helped with balance during headbutts, or just helped them move quickly through dense forests where they foraged. While not as massive as Triceratops, or as flashy as Stegosaurus, pachycephalosaurs show us another creative path evolution can take. Instead of growing armor on their backs or tails, they concentrated their defenses and displays on the head. Their strategy was personal and direct. Don't run from a challenge. Meet it head-on, literally. Ceratopsians, from tiny runners to Triceratops titans. Triceratops was the armored face of the Cretaceous, but its ancestors were small, quick, and surprisingly humble. There were no horns or frills on these early ceratopsians. They didn't attack animals that were after them or fight great battles. But over millions of years, these tiny runners would change into some of the most famous dinosaurs in history, with huge heads, fancy frills, and scary face weapons. Here's the story of how the ceratopsians went from being small plant-eating squirrels to huge eaters that made even the biggest predators afraid. It all began in Asia around 160 million years ago with small two-legged dinosaurs like Yinlong, a fleet-footed rabbit-sized herbivore that looked more like a bird than a behemoth. These early ceratopsians had sharp beaks for slicing vegetation and light, agile bodies built for speed. They lived in a world filled with predators, so running fast and staying alert was their best survival tactic. But even in these earliest forms, you could see the foundation: a strong skull, a beak-like mouth, and the early hints of the iconic frill that would define their descendants. As time passed and species spread into new environments, ceratopsians began to change. They grew larger, their frills expanded, their jaws became more powerful, and eventually, some of them started walking on all fours instead of just two legs. Protoceratops, found in Mongolia and dating back about 75 million years, was one of the first to showcase this transition. It was about the size of a sheep, had a noticeable neck frill, and was a tough, ground-level grazer. Fossils show it lived in desert environments and may have nested in groups, suggesting social behavior. In one famous fossil, a Protoceratops is locked in combat with a predatory velociraptor, its beak clamped on the raptor's arm, proof that even the smaller ceratopsians could put up a serious fight. But the real explosion came when ceratopsians reached North America. Here, they underwent a dramatic size increase and morphological transformation. Over time, they became enormous, with frills that stretched back like shields and horns that curved, spiked, and flared in all directions. The purpose of these features has been debated for decades. Were the frills used to protect their necks from predators? Possibly. Did the horns serve as weapons? Definitely. But many scientists now believe the frills and horns were also used for display, helping individuals recognize each other, attract mates, or intimidate rivals without actual combat. There were dozens of genera, each with unique shapes and sizes. Centrosaurus had forward-facing nasal horns. Styracosaurus grew long spikes from its frill like a prehistoric crown. Pachyrhinosaurus didn't even have typical horns. It had thick, bony bosses instead, like built-in battering rams. And of course, there was Triceratops, the most famous of all. Living in the very last days of the dinosaur age, Triceratops horridus was about 30 feet long, weighed as much as a truck, and had 3 sharp horns and a solid scalloped frill that made it look like a prehistoric knight. It likely traveled in herds, defended its young, and stood its ground when threatened. It's amazing how different and skilled these dinosaurs became. They had horns that were short, long, curled, straight, and even sideways. Some frills had holes in them, maybe to make them lighter. Some were made of solid bone. Some of them had rows of pretty knobs. There were no two ceratopsians that were exactly the same. This suggests that different species responded to their own environments and social structures. It was a lot like how deer and antelope use their antlers today, not just to fight, but also to show off, claim territory, or signal authority. And despite being herbivores, they were not defenseless. A full-grown Triceratops could likely kill or seriously injure a predator with a single thrust of its horns. Bite marks and broken bones on T-Rex fossils suggest they didn't always win those battles. One fossil shows a T-Rex with a partially healed puncture wound to the jaw, possibly caused by a Triceratops horn, meaning the king of the dinosaurs may have picked a fight with the wrong beast. The rise of tyrannosaurs, from chicken-sized to apex giant. There were not many tyrannosaurs in the world before Tyrannosaurus rex became the most feared landkiller. Most people wouldn't even know that their ancestors were connected to the huge bone crusher from the late Cretaceous because they were so small, feathered, and light. Millions of years, though, these small hunters changed, adapted, and slowly but surely made their way to the top of the food chain. They had to be patient and persistent. And then they had one of the most shocking changes in the history of evolution. The earliest known tyrannosaurs lived over 150 million years ago, during the Jurassic period. One of them was Proceratosaurus, a small predator about the size of a large dog, with a narrow snout and a lightweight body. It didn't have the massive skull or banana-sized teeth of its future relatives. Instead, it likely relied on speed, sharp senses, and agility to catch small prey like lizards or baby dinosaurs. These early forms didn't dominate. They survived on the edges. As the Jurassic gave way to the Cretaceous, tyrannosaurs remained small and overlooked. While giant predators like Allosaurus, Carcharodontosaurus, and Spinosaurus ruled the land and water, tyrannosaurs stayed in the background. They were fast, feathered, and probably intelligent, but not especially threatening. One of the most famous of these mid-sized ancestors is Dilong, discovered in China. It measured just about 6 feet long and was covered in a coat of proto-feathers, proof that even the terrifying T-Rex likely had feathery relatives. But things began to change around 90 million years ago. Something happened in the ecosystems of Laurasia, the northern continents that would become North America and Asia. Many of the large theropods that had dominated for millions of years began to disappear. This left behind an ecological vacuum, a throne with no king, and the tyrannosaurs were ready to take it. Evolution kicked into high gear. Their legs became longer and more powerful. Their skulls grew larger, their jaws stronger, and their teeth thicker and deadlier. Their arms, surprisingly, shrank, possibly to keep balance or avoid injury during attacks. By the time we reach Lithonax, an early large tyrannosaur from 80 million years ago, the transformation is nearly complete. Its name means Gore King, and it's easy to see why. This predator had a wide, robust skull with forward-facing eyes, giving it exceptional depth perception. It was still smaller than T-Rex, but it was clearly heading in that direction. Then came Daspletosaurus, Albertosaurus, and Tarbosaurus, each one larger, meaner, and more specialized than the last. The last ruler to appear was Tyrannosaurus rex, which lived about 68 million years ago. It was a land-based top hunter that was 40 feet long and could weigh up to 10 tons. With over 12,000 pounds of force, its teeth could break bone. Its teeth weren't very sharp. They were thick and grooved, so they could cut through meat, muscle, and even bone without breaking. Its head was strong like a helmet, and it had amazing binocular vision that led its bite. Its brain wasn't very big, but it was advanced enough to handle complex behavior and great senses. This was not a monster with no thoughts. Smart, planned, and scary all at the same time. What made tyrannosaurs especially powerful was their balance of size and speed. Despite their bulk, they had long legs that allowed them to move quickly, possibly up to 20 miles per hour in short bursts. Their tails acted as counterbalances, keeping them stable during sudden lunges or fast turns. Even their tiny arms, often mocked, were muscular and tipped with 2 strong claws. Some scientists believe they may have been used to hold on to struggling prey or help the animal rise from a resting position. The tyrannosaurs didn't just use raw force. Their heads were hollow inside, which made them lighter but still strong. They had great hearing and could pick up low-frequency sounds that could have helped them find food over long distances. They had a great sense of smell, maybe the best of any dinosaur, so they could follow dead or alive animals for miles. The impact that ended everything, the last roar of the giants. A flash of light went across the sky first. It was brighter than the sun and moved faster than any storm. The dinosaur era would end in a matter of seconds, not with a slow decline, but with a bang so strong that it changed the shape of the Earth. A 6-mile-wide asteroid hit what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico 66 million years ago. The world changed for good in an instant. After ruling Earth for more than 150 million years, the Mesozoic giants were about to end their story. The impact site, now known as the Chicxulub crater, was ground zero for one of the most catastrophic events in Earth's history. The asteroid hit with the force of over 1 billion atomic bombs, unleashing shockwaves that flattened forests for thousands of miles. Molten debris blasted into the atmosphere and rained back down as firestorms. Oceans boiled, earthquakes tore across continents, and within hours, the skies darkened as soot, dust, and sulfur clouded the air, blocking sunlight around the globe. What followed wasn't a fiery apocalypse alone, it was an ice-cold silence. With sunlight blocked for months, possibly years, plants died en masse. Without plants, herbivores starved. Without herbivores, carnivores fell. It was a slow, relentless collapse of the food chain, and very few made it through. Around 75% of all species on Earth vanished, including every non-avian dinosaur. The reign of creatures like T-Rex, Triceratops, Ankylosaurus, and Hadrosaurus came to a sudden, brutal end. But this wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a reset button. A moment when Earth wiped the slate clean and opened the stage to new actors. Small mammals that had lived in the shadows suddenly had space to grow. With no towering dinosaurs to compete with or hide from, they began to thrive. In the ashes of one world, another began to form, the age of mammals. Still, not all dinosaurs went away. The birds, which looked like current dinosaurs, were able to stay alive. They had an advantage because they were small, had warm bodies, and could change what they ate. Not long after their cousins died out, they took to the skies and lived on. The bones of every pigeon, owl, eagle, and sparrow you see today hold fossils from the Mesozoic. As for the others, they left behind clues, Bones turned to stone, footprints preserved in mud, and fossilized nests buried beneath ancient sediments. Their world may be gone, but they didn't vanish without a trace. In places like Hell Creek in Montana and Alberta's Dinosaur Provincial Park, paleontologists uncover the last breaths of the dinosaurs' golden age. A T-Rex tooth lodged in a Triceratops frill, a clutch of unhatched eggs buried mid-nesting, a fossilized skin imprint, capturing every scale in perfect detail. These aren't just relics, they are echoes. And the interesting thing is that it almost never happened at all. If the asteroid had hit a few minutes earlier or later, it might have hit the deep ocean instead of ground that is high in carbonate. Scientists think that this bad spot, which is full of sulfur-rich rock, was a major factor in making the sky darker and starting the fall of the global economy. The dinosaurs might have lived if the crash spot had been somewhere else. It's possible that T-Rex is still around, but fate had other plans. In the Mesozoic Era, there were a lot of crazy trials in evolution. There were fast pack hunts, loud plant eaters, strange creatures that looked like birds, and herbivores with armored tanks. Dinosaurs weren't just survivors, they were also shapeshifters who changed themselves and their world until one last strike destroyed it all. But their heritage lives on in birds, skeletons, and the stories we keep finding out about them. If this trip through the age of giants got your attention, please like the video, follow for more deep dives into the past, and leave a comment below. Which time period of the dinosaurs would you go back to if you could?